One day, Hollywood starlet Anita Page opened her fan mail to find a letter containing wild ramblings about her beauty and talent, plus a play-by-play of all her movements on screen. She didn't know it yet, but this one letter was about to ruin her career and her life. They called Anita Page the most beautiful face in Hollywood, and the screen siren duked it out with the likes of Greta Garbo for the most frenzied fan base. However, her glittering story proves there is always a price for fame, and the cost for Anita Page was incredibly high. Anita Page was born on August 4th, 1910, and her rise to fame in the Roaring Twenties was as fast and loose as they come. As a teenager, the naturally blonde, blue-eyed Anita was already stunning, so she wasn't necessarily surprised when she got a deal to move to Hollywood with an outfit called Kenilworth Productions. In fact, Anita and her mother boarded a train to California to work with the studio. No questions asked. But when the train stopped in Chicago, the situation turned. First, an older white-haired man got on and introduced himself as the company's owner. And while Anita had no idea who he was, her mother did, and her blood ran cold. He was the infamously unhinged Harry Thaw, millionaire railroad heir and confirmed murderer. Thaw, who was once married to it-girl actress Evelyn Nesbit, had killed his wife's lover in a fit of rage in 1906, then pleaded insanity. Justifiably terrified, Anita's mother wriggled the girl out of her contract, and they had to start in Hollywood from scratch. Despite this setback, Page's star power was undeniable, and soon the much more respectable and influential MGM Studios was looking into her. In another bout of bad luck, Page got a nasty cold the day of her screen test, and executives forced her to perform for them anyway, along with their studio mainstay actor, William Haynes. Nonetheless, they signed her anyway. Drawing loosely on her paternal grandfather's Spanish heritage, MGM set about marketing Page as the blue-eyed Latin to distinguish her from their other starlets. It worked, and Page's second film was supporting then-ingenue Joan Crawford in the smash hit Our Dancing Daughters. The film would be a breakthrough for both actresses, but behind the scenes, things were far from pretty. Joan Crawford's Hollywood career would be littered with snipes and feuds, and her time with Anita Page in Our Dancing Daughters was where it all started. According to rumor, Crawford had taken advantage of casting couch opportunities to secure the lead in the film in the first place, but her behavior on set to Page spoke for itself. Page later complained that while working with Crawford, the actress did everything she could to mess up her performance. At one point, Crawford reportedly warned Page not to hit one of the actors too hard in an argument scene, but when Page asked the man if she should hold back, he was patently unconcerned with her hurting him. Page was sure that Crawford had tried to make her look non-committal and unconvincing in the scene, and said to her mother that her little ploy didn't work. Although Page and Crawford made 2 sequels to Our Dancing Daughters, by the end they weren't even talking to each other between scenes. Page admitted, "I ended up loathing Joan." However, this may have been for more personal reasons than professional ones. Page claimed that Crawford, who had earned a reputation for her strong libido, tried to hit on me several times. Still, Page was gorgeous, flirtatious, and very single, so it's not surprising that men and women tried to court her. Accordingly, one of her first suitors was a big catch. After playing Clark Gable's love interest in a film, she and the Hollywood heartthrob started a relationship. Though it was brief, Page left a lasting impression. Gable later wrote, "She was a unique beauty. When I worked with Grace Kelly and looked into her eyes, I remembered Anita Page." Shortly after, none other than the German Prince Louis Ferdinand contacted MGM studio head Louis B. Mayer when he was over in America and requested a date with Anita to the premiere of Showboat in Los Angeles. But men who dated Page soon found out she came with certain baggage. Page's mother, father, and even brother stayed close to Page when she was on the rise, with Anita employing them in various positions to support her image. Strict Catholics, they also had strong opinions about the people she dated, with her mother in particular being very protective and jealous about Anita stepping out with almost anyone at all. Knowing about the Page family's possessiveness, Mayer actually wrote the prince back, begging, Please, we can get you anyone else. Anyone but Anita Page. Though the prince insisted, he ended up regretting it. Anita's parents let her go with him, but only on the conditions that he come over to their house to meet them beforehand, and that they got to accompany the couple as chaperones to the premiere. As popular gossip columnist Luella Parsons noted the next day about the stale date, Anita will never be queen now. Other suitors presented different problems. In particular, Page's co-star William Haynes, the man she did her first MGM screen test with, asked for her hand in marriage, despite the fact that he was one of the only openly gay men in Hollywood. Page turned him down, then equally gay matinee idol Ramon Navarro did the same and received another rejection from the star. Soon, though, her love life turned from quirky to sinister. Irving Thalberg, the vice president of MGM, had a serious crush on Page, despite being married to actress Norma Shearer, and he had the full support of Louis B. Mayer in his intentions. Page was well aware that Thalberg wanted to seduce her, but not overly interested. Nonetheless, the executive even insisted that she call him Daddy, a request she submitted to with great reluctance. Eventually, Page sat Thalberg down and told him, "Admire me from afar, darling, and that will be just fine for the both of us." Unfortunately, that wasn't fine for Thalberg, but it would take him time to get his revenge. At the end of the 1920s, the rise of the talkies came, and suddenly Page, who previously only did silent films, was training her voice for the camera. And while many silent stars notoriously couldn't survive the transition to the talkies, whether it was because they had strong accents, displeasing voices, or trouble remembering their lines, Page surprisingly flourished, despite not particularly liking the new medium. With a melodious voice and a sharp memory, the actress starred in the musical Broadway Melody in 1929, which went on to become the first talkie to win an Academy Award. But what goes up must come down, and Anita was about to fall hard. Following the release of Broadway Melody, almost no actress was as big as Anita Page, save one. Page was popular, but Greta Garbo was a household name. Indeed, Garbo was the only actress at this time who got more fan mail than Page, and she also beat her out of the top spot in a major popularity poll the same year Broadway Melody came out. So, sensing Page's weakness, Irving Thalberg came for her again. In 1932, the executive put pressure on Page to give in to his advances once and for all, promising her the lead role in Red-Headed Woman if she would only sleep with him. As Page remembered, he kept saying to me, "The film is yours, but what are you going to do for Daddy?" When Page turned him down for the last time, he decided to punish her. Thalberg started out small. Although Page's movies at MGM had been moneymakers for the studio, they increasingly treated her like a second-rate star. They also asked her to pose for risque photo shoots in revealing dresses. For a girl with protective parents, it was an anxiety-inducing prospect, and Page had to turn down the job. Fed up, Page went to Louis B. Mayer and demanded a raise, but it backfired. Mayer not only denied her request, he also then launched into a long, egotistical speech about how, if he wanted, he could make Page shine in 3 pictures, as well as break her rival Greta Garbo in the same span. After this, Page now had both Thalberg and Mayer as enemies, and the men began loaning Page out to other studios instead of using her. This wasn't an uncommon practice at the time, but the pictures they ordered her to act in were middling at best and muddied Page's previously solid reputation for successful films. This wasn't the end of their power trips either. Still just 22 years old, Page eventually left MGM to try to work in another studio. Fox showed interest, had her do a series of screen tests, and led Page to believe they were about to have her sign a contract. They even set a date for her to come in and look over the fine print. Only that day never arrived. And then Fox stopped taking her calls. Much later, she found out that the very day she had an appointment with the studio, none other than Louis B. Mayer took the Fox head out to lunch, and presumably convinced him not to hire Page. Perhaps the most bitter part of all of this was when Page found out that Joan Crawford, who had apparently ceded to Thalberg's advances, called the executive Papa. It wasn't long before Page became lost in the Hollywood wilderness. After finishing up her contract with MGM, Page began dating Nacio Herb Brown, a composer who was most famous for penning the iconic score to the musical Singin' in the Rain. Though Page was hardly in love with Brown, he would, in a familiar move, incessantly propose to her, with Page turning him down each time. Except, that is, for one night. While partying at the legendary Coconut Grove, Brown plied Page with drinks and asked her one more time. Her head spinning, she managed to say, "I might." Taking this lukewarm reply as a yes, Brown spent the rest of the night convincing Page that they should wed as soon as possible. In particular, he wanted them to head down to Tijuana, where many Hollywood couples had quick nuptials. Ever the good Catholic family girl, Page insisted that they pick up her parents before heading down to Mexico. While her mother wasn't happy with the union, she could do nothing to stop it, and they ended up married. Just not for long. Anita Page made it only 9 months as Mrs. Brown before realizing she simply couldn't make it work with the composer, and that she'd only married him because she had nothing else to do. Besides that, there was another snag. Brown was already married. In his rush to the altar, he hadn't finalized the divorce to his previous wife. Page quickly annulled the marriage and spent a few months flitting around with actress Marion Davies and her married lover, newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst. But she wasn't single for long. Around 1936, she met the handsome naval lieutenant Herschel House while golfing and fell undeniably in love. They both did. As House later boasted to friends, he had proposed by the 10th hole. They married the next year, and Page learned to adapt away from the screen, acting as a naval officer's wife and accompanying House to various postings and events around the world. In between, the couple had 2 children together, and Page found happiness beyond her wildest dreams. Her silver screen days now seemed very far behind her, but a series of tragedies would pull her back in. In 1991, House died from poor health after years of struggles, leaving Page truly alone for the first time in decades. She was now in her 80s and had been living a quiet life in Colorado since her infamous exit from MGM. She might have continued this existence, but fate had a different ending in mind for her. Soon after losing her husband, Page suffered a stroke, only to make a near-miraculous recovery. Afterward, her physical therapist advised her to get in touch with earlier versions of herself. So Page moved back to Los Angeles and made a much-delayed comeback to acting. At 86 years old, she was no longer a leading lady, but she did become a beloved camp horror queen. And for the next decade plus, Page turned herself from a forgotten Hollywood star to an icon. But it was during this period of recaptured youth that Page revealed her darkest secret, one she had kept for decades. While talking to a writer about her glory days, Page casually mentioned, "I knew so many nice men. I knew Mussolini. He used to write to me." As far as anyone knew, Page had never mentioned the Italian dictator as an admirer before, but the story got more disturbing than that. Although Page employed her family to open her fan mail, she did still sometimes help out. And one day in 1929, right around when Broadway Melody came out, she happened upon one written by the notorious dictator. Page, who only had a vague idea of who Mussolini was actually excited by the letter, which gushed with praise for her. As she put it, "I was so thrilled to open this beautiful, adoring letter." Yet while Page only had a passing understanding of Mussolini, he was a complete obsessive about her. She found 8 letters from him in just a week, and one mailroom employee estimated that he sent the starlet over 100 during this period. In them, he would write down practically every movement she made in the films he saw, as well as beg for her to return her autograph to him. He also included photographs of himself. This soon caused Page a world of trouble. While Page was semi-ignorant, MGM wasn't. Irving Thalberg, likely also driven by jealousy, was enraged at the missives, while Louis B. Mayer ordered her not to respond to Mussolini in any way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, as it turned out, Page's mother, who was a diligent responder to fans, had already sent him back a photo of the star, complete with a forged autograph. It had devastating effects. Page was already on thin ice with MGM at this point, and this debacle may have been the final nail in the coffin. As an MGM secretary revealed, with Thalberg already desperate to get rid of Page, Mayer now had no problem axing her after the incident. As he put it, when Anita's mother was sending that stuff to Mussolini, that was really the last straw for those two. For her part, Page later disowned Mussolini's affections, saying, "I know I was real pleased with all the attention, but really, I think he was a bit of a pig." When Anita Page passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 98 in 2008, she truly was the last star of the silence. After all, she was the last living person to attend the first Academy Awards in 1929, and her career spanned decades, studio feuds, and one major image.